When a localized maritime dispute metastasizes into a theater-wide exchange of long-range fires, the fundamental architecture of regional deterrence has failed. What we are witnessing across the Middle East is no longer a series of isolated tactical engagements. It is the systemic fracturing of a precarious status quo, driven by the collapse of freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. The transition from diplomatic maneuvering to sustained kinetic action represents a profound shift in the regional balance of power. The mechanisms of conflict management have been exhausted. We are now observing a scenario where structural pressures dictate that both primary actors feel compelled to continuously raise the stakes, fearing any pause might be interpreted as a lack of resolve. The most recent developments demonstrate a clear crossing of established thresholds. According to statements from United States Central Command, Washington initiated a heavily expanded wave of strikes deep into Iranian territory on Friday afternoon. These operations, reportedly authorized directly by the Trump administration, are designed to degrade Iran's core military capabilities. By deliberately shifting away from coastal installations to target strategic infrastructure deep within the Iranian interior, reportedly including vital bridges and logistical nodes, as noted by the Wall Street Journal, the United States is attempting to alter Tehran's fundamental risk calculus. The strategic objective is to apply unsustainable pressure on the Iranian state apparatus, compelling a cessation of its disruptive activities against international shipping in the Gulf. To understand the gravity of this shift, one must examine the underlying military logic and force posture required to execute it. The United States is actively expanding its operational depth by transferring combat aircraft from Europe to the Middle East. More tellingly, reports from Israeli media indicate that 10 American aerial refueling tankers are being deployed to bases in Israel. This logistical maneuver is the most significant indicator of Washington's long-term intentions. Tactical fighter aircraft simply do not possess the unrefueled combat radius necessary to conduct sustained, deep penetration strikes into Iranian airspace from peripheral bases. By surging refueling capabilities into the Levant, the Pentagon is explicitly building the logistical scaffolding required for a protracted campaign. It signals an intent to maintain a relentlessly high operational tempo, generating continuous strike sorties that will test the resilience of Iranian air defenses. In response to this systematic dismantlement of its infrastructure, Iran is executing a calculated strategy of horizontal escalation. Tehran recognizes it cannot match the conventional power projection of the United States. Therefore, its military doctrine dictates widening the geometry of the battlefield to exploit the vulnerabilities of Washington's regional partners. The recent ballistic missile strikes targeting locations in Saudi Arabia and Jordan are a textbook application of this approach. By launching projectiles toward the Red Sea port of Yanbu and the critical hub of Al-Kharj, specifically near Prince Sultan Air Base, a vital node for American air power, Iran is sending a precise strategic signal. The message is unambiguous. If the United States uses regional facilities to dismantle the Iranian state, the economic and military infrastructure of those host nations will become highly vulnerable targets in a regionalized war of attrition. The situation unfolding in Jordan provides a stark illustration of the intense political constraints bearing down on America's regional allies. According to CBS News, several American service members have been injured in strikes targeting military installations within Jordanian territory this week. This development places the government in Amman in an agonizing strategic dilemma. Jordan relies on its security partnership with the United States, yet it faces immense domestic pressure regarding the presence of Western forces. This friction recently forced Jordanian officials to categorically deny the deployment of American troops on their soil. Iran is astutely exploiting this political vulnerability. By striking these shared facilities, Tehran is not merely seeking tactical military effects. It is deliberately attempting to fracture alliance cohesion, forcing host nations to reconsider the cost-benefit analysis of supporting American operations. This strategy of cost imposition is visibly extending across the Arabian Peninsula into Kuwait. Reports indicate that an Iranian strike recently targeted both a power generation plant and a water desalination facility in Kuwait, resulting in significant fires and material damage. Kuwait has long served as an indispensable logistical anchor for American forces operating in the northern Gulf. By deliberately expanding its target list to include dual-use or strictly civilian infrastructure, Iran is escalating the conflict beyond the purely military domain. The destruction of a desalination plant in an arid region is an attack on the fundamental viability of the state. Tehran's objective is to make the societal and economic cost of hosting American forces so exceptionally painful that the Gulf monarchies will eventually pressure Washington to de-escalate. At the center of this spiraling confrontation lies the contested control of the Strait of Hormuz. The reported collapse of a prior diplomatic understanding intended to guarantee the free transit of commercial shipping has created a dangerous vacuum. Washington operates under the assumption that systematically dismantling strategic infrastructure deep inside Iran will generate enough structural pressure to force Tehran to abandon its maritime interdiction strategy. However, the history of coercion campaigns against entrenched regional powers demonstrates that overwhelming force often yields diminishing returns before it produces political compliance. We are witnessing two adversaries climbing an escalation ladder where neither sees a viable off-ramp. Backing down at this juncture incurs severe reputational costs and risks validating the other side's deterrence strategy. Furthermore, the sheer gravity of this state-on-state confrontation is inevitably generating chaotic secondary effects, creating highly permissive environments for opportunistic non-state actors. The recent hijacking of the chemical tanker Asana in the Gulf of Aden serves as a prime example. While initial maritime intelligence suggests this incident is the work of Somali pirates rather than a coordinated operation by Yemeni forces, the broader implication remains identical. The global maritime security apparatus is stretched to its breaking point. When international naval task forces, including the European Union's Aspides mission, are consumed by the demands of high-intensity conflict deterrence, the standard security umbrella begins to fray. The successful diversion of a commercial vessel toward the Somali port of Bosaso is a direct symptom of a distracted and overcommitted international security architecture. As we analyze the trajectory of this conflict, it becomes evident that we are observing a highly dangerous decision-making cycle driven by conflicting strategic assumptions. The United States command structure appears to believe that the application of overwhelming firepower, coupled with a massive logistical buildup, will eventually reestablish credible deterrence and compel Iranian behavioral change. Tehran, conversely, appears firmly convinced that by continually widening the theater of war to include the critical infrastructure of Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Kuwait, it can stretch American defensive capabilities and shatter regional alliances. Iran is betting that the specter of a shattered global energy market and burning Gulf infrastructure will force Washington to halt its campaign long before the Iranian state ceases to function. Available reporting does not yet establish which of these strategic gambles will prove accurate, but the parameters of the conflict have undeniably shifted. Neither Washington nor Tehran is displaying any tangible signs of reassessing their maximalist positions. The deliberate transition from limited retaliatory strikes to the systematic targeting of bridges, power plants, and water desalination facilities strongly indicates that the traditional guardrails of Middle Eastern conflict have been dismantled. What began as a determined effort to secure a vital maritime choke point has rapidly morphed into a grueling contest of national endurance. The fundamental question moving forward is no longer centered on the tactical success of any individual airstrike. Rather, it is a question of logistical sustainability. How long can this extraordinary operational tempo be maintained before the regional security architecture reaches its breaking point?